Guerrilla warfare, a form of irregular warfare, involves small groups using unconventional tactics to fight larger, more traditional military forces. Its roots trace back to ancient times, evolving through various conflicts across history. Guerrillas use unconventional tactics to fight a larger, more traditional military force. The word guerrilla comes from the Spanish word for little war and became widely used after the Spanish resistance against Napoleon's invasion in the early 19th century. While guerrilla tactics have been around for centuries, the term itself came into common use during the Peninsular War from 1808 to 1814, when Spanish and Portuguese fighters, along with some of their allies, used hit-and-run tactics, ambushes and sabotage to harass Napoleon's French forces. These tactics were effective because they leveraged local knowledge, mobility, and the support of the civilian population. Guerrilla warfare has ancient and medieval roots, evolving through various historical contexts to adapt to the needs and strategies of those fighting against larger, more organized forces. Ancient and medieval roots. Hannibal in the Second Punic War, from 218 to 201 BC, employed guerrilla-style tactics against the Roman Empire. In the American Revolution, from 1775 to 1783, militias used guerrilla tactics against British forces, notably in battles like Lexington and Concord, and later in campaigns like the Battle of Cowpens. The Spanish guerrilla resistance from 1808 to 1814. As mentioned, the Spanish resistance against Napoleon's army in the early 19th century was one of the defining moments for modern guerrilla warfare. The term guerrilla was popularized during this period, and it set a model for future insurgencies. Spanish civilians and soldiers used surprise attacks and sabotage, often blending into the civilian population to avoid detection. The Vietnam War, from 1955 to 1975. One of the most famous and successful uses of guerrilla warfare was by the Viet Cong against the United States and South Vietnamese forces. Led by the North Vietnamese Army, the VC utilized dense jungles, booby traps, and a deep network of tunnels to stage surprise attacks and avoid direct confrontation with the superior American military. The effectiveness of these tactics eventually wore down the American will to fight. All right, let's dive into the Cuban Revolution and its lasting impact on modern guerrilla movements. The Cuban Revolution, which took place from 1953 to 1959, was led by Fidel Castro and Che Guevara. These revolutionaries employed guerrilla tactics against the dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista. They used the mountains of Cuba as cover, launching ambushes, sabotage, and small-scale raids on government forces. Ultimately, their efforts were successful, and the Cuban government established itself as a communist regime. Following the success of the Cuban Revolution, guerrilla warfare became an influential tool for revolutionary movements across Latin America and Africa during the 1950s to the 1970s. Examples include the FARC in Colombia and the MPLA in Angola. These movements used guerrilla tactics to fight oppressive governments and foreign-backed forces. In recent times, guerrilla warfare has been used by non-state actors and insurgent groups, including ISIS and the Taliban, who use asymmetrical tactics in conflicts against more technologically advanced and well-funded state military forces. Guerrilla tactics are designed to make up for the lack of firepower and resources when compared to a traditional military. Some of the key tactics include ambushes. Guerrilla forces lie in wait, setting traps for larger forces. Sabotage. Attacks on infrastructure like roads, bridges, and communications disrupt the enemy. Hit-and-run attacks. Quick assaults followed by a rapid withdrawal to avoid confrontation. Blending with civilians, guerrilla fighters often mix with local populations, which makes it difficult for traditional armies to distinguish combatants from civilians. Psychological warfare. Guerrillas often seek to demoralize and weaken the resolve of the enemy by creating a constant threat. Guerrilla tactics are designed to make up for the lack of firepower and resources when compared to a traditional military. Some of the key tactics include ambushes. Guerrilla forces lie in wait, setting traps for larger forces. Sabotage. Attacks on infrastructure such as roads, bridges, and communications disrupt the enemy. Hit-and-run attacks. Quick assaults followed by a rapid withdrawal to avoid confrontation. Blending with civilians. Guerrilla fighters often mix with local populations, which makes it difficult for traditional armies to distinguish combatants from civilians. Psychological warfare. Guerrillas often seek to demoralize and weaken the resolve of the enemy by creating a constant threat. Guerrilla warfare, presents some unique challenges. Unlike conventional battles, it relies heavily on surprise attacks and mobility. This means, fighters often operate in small, agile groups, making them hard to track. But it also demands a lot from the soldiers, both physically and mentally. They need to be, incredibly resilient and adaptable, constantly on the move and always alert. This style of fighting can be frankly exhausting and, at times, quite isolating. Yet, it has a profound impact on the larger conflict, often tipping the scales in unexpected ways. Challenges of guerrilla warfare. Legitimacy. Guerrilla forces are often seen as terrorists or insurgents by the state they are fighting against, leading to difficult battles over political legitimacy. Sustainability. While effective in the short term, guerrilla movements often struggle to maintain momentum without support from external allies or local populations. Counterinsurgency. Governments facing guerrilla forces develop counterinsurgency strategies, which aim to isolate guerrillas from the population and destroy their base of support. Guerrilla warfare remains a significant feature of many modern conflicts. It has been a defining characteristic of insurgent and resistance movements worldwide. Because of the growing asymmetry in modern warfare, with smaller groups fighting against technologically superior armies, guerrilla tactics are a core aspect of how non-state actors challenge established governments and military forces. Section conclusion. Duration: 3 minutes 45 seconds to 4 minutes. PAR of 5 seconds. Overall, the history of guerrilla warfare illustrates the ways in which irregular combat strategies can reshape the dynamics of both regional and global conflicts.